Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I have my friend Mona here today. Again, we love Mona for her insight and the support in helping us speak our truth and the discovery and understanding of what are these things that happen to us. And I feel like I've gone on a bit of a journey with Mona, looking at these different laws and trying to understand like what applied when and how and that sort of thing. And yeah, it's been really great to both be looking at those things separately, but then also together. And that's been a really cool experience. So thank you, Mona, for joining us again today.
Oh, thank you for having me again today. Yeah, it's always fun because we have um you're bright and early in the morning and I'm in the evening, and then when you come on my show in the morning it's flip-flop. So it's so strange having it on the other side of the world, but
Yeah.
definitely is
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, so you can catch Mona on two different channels, the Fat Grammy channel and also Scientology Crimes. And often Mona does a morning, really like a morning chit chat type of thing. And I like, if I'm still up at that time, I like to join in. It's just, I don't know, it's very kind of laid back. There's a great group of people in there too, and
There
yeah, it
is.
just feels very warm and comforting. I feel like. So for me, in
Thanks.
my wind down time, it's lovely to check in with you guys and say hello.
I appreciate that. Yep, and I've
Yeah.
got I can see you guys linked on this on Miriam's chat. I'll try and respond, but I'm not in that room, so I'll try and respond as we see people chatting.
Yeah. Well, let's say hello to a few people. Hi, Gina Freya. Hi, Melanie. Welcome. Hi, Lupita. Thanks for joining us. And King's Kid. Yep. Thank you so much for yeah, hanging out with us today. We're going to talk about a really important topic, which is we're really going to focus on human trafficking in the US. What is the law? And actually, that law is quite extensive. We're going to kind of hit some bullet points and then we're going to go into a deep dive in a case. Now, human trafficking is broken down into two key areas, which is sex trafficking and forced labor. We're primarily going to focus on the forced labor in terms of looking at looking at these couple of articles that we have set up of this particular case, which is the UNOI case. But we're also going to touch on what sex trafficking is and talk a little bit about that as well. So I guess to kick it off, what we'll do is we'll bring in our slides. So, as I said, the topic of today is human trafficking. This is the federal law. Um, Let me see if I can make that bigger for me. Okay, so this is the federal law across the U.S., which was created in the year 2000. And this is called the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, or TVPA. And what it did is it equipped the U.S. government with tools and resources to eliminate modern forms of slavery domestically and internationally. So big, really important law. Now, in regards to human trafficking, the modern prohibitions of human trafficking in the United States have their roots in the 13th Amendment to the US Constitution, which barred slavery and involuntary servitude in 1960. Sorry, let me say that again. Which barred slavery and involuntary servitude in 1865. Prior to 2000, the Department of Justice, DOJ, filed human trafficking cases under several federal statutes related to involuntary servitude and slavery, but the criminal laws were narrow and patchwork. So, this is just a bit of the history of prior to 2000. There were things in place. We had the 13th Amendment to the US Constitution, and that was back in 1865. And from that point, there were laws in place, but they just really didn't do all the things that we really needed it to do. And yeah,
It definitely combined them all into one spot, so that way they were easier to grasp rather than trying to pick through straws of the law. Yep.
right. And that's a good point too, because often human trafficking is done through a network of people and it can be across various locations. So I think this also allowed for a lot more coordination. And this is really a summary of what this allowed the US government to do. So it gave them the new tools and resources to mount a comprehensive and coordinated campaign to eliminate modern forms of slavery domestically and internationally. So, critically, the TVPA established the framework for the 3 Ps of the fight against human trafficking, which is protection, prevention, and prosecution. So that was what it enabled the US government to begin to do. And doing that through a coordinated campaign is really essential to combating human trafficking, organizations. Yeah. So then there has been, since the year 2000, there has been some reauthorizations or amendments or additions and that sort of thing. And this one was particularly interesting in the year 2003. So the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act of 2003 refined federal criminal provisions against trafficking to include adding human trafficking crimes as a Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO. So, in terms of the federal criminal prosecution investigation, it created this particular amendment for RICO as an organization for the corrupt organizations, which is very, very important and an essential part of what this is. Then it also created a civil remedy. In other words, you could pursue this as a person through civil court. Enabling trafficking victims to file lawsuits against their traffickers in federal district court. And the Danny Masterson case, as I understand it, the civil case, has submitted a filing to add this RICO Act
Correct.
into the lawsuit, and that's in the civil court. And as far as I understand, that hasn't been, I think because they're still waiting on this appeal process of Danny Masterson with the criminal case. So anyways, but that will be really interesting to see how that develops. And really that is focusing on the organization. That's what's really important. And in that filing, they described the organization as, as a corrupt organization.
Exactly.
And
And we're
yeah,
not going to
as
we're
a
not going to go
criminal.
through we're going to go through the UNOI, but the P
Yeah.
Diddy case was based on this also.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it was described in this filing that Scientology is a criminal enterprise, which was for me, and I did a video on that. It was really incredible to see that. And it's so important, language and learning about these things in law. Like, this is really important because I never had any of this in my childhood. It wasn't a part of my education. I mean, I barely even it couldn't even be represented as an education. It was basic literacy. But we were not informed. We weren't informed of our rights. We weren't informed of anything. And it's great to see that. And these are more recent laws, but it's great to see how, the government is evolving and understanding these nuanced and complex situations that have had, great, like catastrophic effects on people, on adults and children. And so to see the law coming along and then to also be, more recently sort of learning and understanding like what those laws are, learning about rights, learning about, what violates rights, what are crimes and how are they, what various acts apply and that sort of thing. It's very
Right.
empowering.
It
Yeah.
is. And to be real honest, the TVPA, when it was passed in 2000, brought about the statute of limitations that so it can go back to when the beginning of this TVPA started, when the act started. So
Yeah.
some of the claims that through either through sexual or through your state sexual abuse crimes, if they relate to the human trafficking, they can be brought about, and the statute of limitations goes back to 2000. So it
Very important.
it broadens those aspects.
Yeah, that's very important. So, and interesting, and that's a really good thing to mention too, because in this case that we're going to look at for UNOI, the offenses are dated back to from the year 2000 onwards. So this dating of the year 2000 and where this applies is really important, and it's important for people to know if they do potentially have a case in the civil, criminal, whether that's state or federal, that looking at, well, this is really a federal thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? With the statute of limitations, did that change for state? I mean, my understanding is, definitely the Human Trafficking Act is certainly a federal law,
It is
and
a
that would be heard
federal
in a
law.
federal court.
Yes, and
Yeah.
when you move people from state to state, or if this is how the RICO comes in, is that there is business between states, interstates, rather than just intrastate. So that's how the RICO plays in and makes it federal, because it's going from state to state, either the trafficking or the business.
All right. Now, human trafficking. So, human trafficking, also called trafficking in persons, is a crime of exploitation. Traffickers profit at the expense of their victims. The United States recognizes two primary forms of trafficking in persons: sex trafficking and forced labor. And I would add as well to what you're saying is, yes, so it often involves, interstate, but also it's not required, a person is not required to be transported in order for a human trafficking to apply, just so everyone understands that. If they are potentially thinking about their experiences, it doesn't, you don't have to have been transported out of a state or out of the country or into a state or country. The human trafficking still applies. There are very specific properties, I guess, that are kind of examined and applied to what is a human trafficking case.
Correct.
So let's talk about sex trafficking. So those two being the two main components, sex trafficking and forced labor. So and this is really brief. There is so much information about this, but we're going to just touch on like a few things here in regards to these two types of human trafficking. And so sex trafficking specifically encompasses the range of activities involved when a trafficker uses force, fraud, or coercion to compel another adult to engage in a commercial sex act, or causes a child to engage in a commercial sex act. In the case of a child, there does not need to be force, fraud, or coercion present to constitute sex trafficking. Now, we have recently begun to understand this in more, I think, broader terms, or like more of the nuances of what this actually means.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're talking about, you're talking about profit, you're talking about how an organization profits from, like, so like if we're looking at specifically moving perpetrators around, then if the organization is not disclosing, they are protecting the perpetrator, they are allowing for abuse or risk of abuse to continue. They are, especially not protecting children, and they have a benefit. So they are in some way profiting, whether that is because of their reputation that they're protecting, or because of the income that they are able to continue to bring in from people who are not aware and are not informed that that this is in place. And then additionally as well, what is looked at is the policies and the practices that are in place that continue to make this a systemic problem for the organization, and continues to expose anyone, or particularly children, if it's in the case of child predators, to that risk, to that harm.
Exactly.
What would you add to that, Mona?
I would say that, adding on to that statement itself, is that you don't necessarily have to move the child within the state or across state lines or even internationally for a sex act, that the predator could be moved and the child moved with the predator. That's still sex trafficking.
Mm,
That's still what that's considered. It's not necessarily that you're taking child Johnny or John Doe and moving them, let's say, to Florida so that way they could
right,
perform sex acts. That's not,
right.
that doesn't constitute just that definition. It's much broader than that.
Yes. So that was a really important thing for me to learn because I had a limited definition of what sex trafficking is. And what you're saying, Mona, is in the organization's involvement in exposing this child to further harms by relocating them together or placing the child with the perpetrator, those sorts of things. And it's also, yeah, it's really about the exposure of harm that the organization's
Hmm.
involvement to further harming that person or child.
Hmm.
Yeah.
For the benefit
Um,
of their
right.
organization, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Great point. So, that's what those aspects are looked at, and it's also about, yeah, the means of the organization, the way in which they are involved and facilitate these things. Are there policies, practices in place that create this systemic issue? And yeah, and so yeah, it was just really good to have a broader definition of what sex trafficking is, and I can absolutely relate it to my own case and see where that applies in the
Hmm.
organization participating and facilitating in that way. So, yeah, very important thing to understand. Now, what I wanted to do, and I might just check if anybody has any questions on what we've covered so far. Yeah, this is a good point, Amanda Beaumont. One thing I've only learned recently is that trafficking is across state lines, not just between countries. So, yeah,
Correct.
absolutely. That's a really good point.
It's
Um,
intrastate also. Sex
yeah,
trafficking is not
intrastate.
just, yep,
Hmm.
it's intrastate. It's going from LA to Sacramento. It is going from Portland to McMinnville. I mean, it can be within the state
Mm.
also.
It's such a good point, Mona. Thank you. It's really important. That's why, like, so these details, and I know we're not going to be able to cover everything today, but we're trying to touch on and highlight some really important details because it can help in understanding what happened to a person, and if there is a possibility that they can, achieve justice or pursue justice in some way, or even just understanding what happened to them. I think all of that is helpful.
Hmm.
So Evil Blue Eye said, transportation can simply be taking you from your location to the location. They will benefit from you all to themselves. Thank you for speaking on this. Fantastic. Thank you so much for your comment. That is great. It's true. And it is really about that benefit and how the organization profits in the facilitating the criminal activity.
Right.
And that's really is where their liability is, or their own criminality. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to share this too. Abuses of Scientology. They trafficked me right after abuse across the U.S. and then to the Free Winds. And the Free Winds is a ship, Scientology owned ship. And yeah, it's horrifying. It's horrifying that this goes on, and I'm so sorry that you experienced that. Yeah. The thing is with being on the Free Winds, it's so isolating. They have complete control over you, and you have to turn over your passport, and you can't just, you're on a ship in the ocean, and yeah, sure, they
Right.
do dock at times, but you have to get special permission to be able to leave that ship. Like, this is human trafficking. This is, and in this case, sex trafficking, where there was sexual abuse as well. included. So yeah. Um, all right. So thank you guys. That was it was great to get your perspective on that. And what I wanted to do is just show you. Okay. Let me just work out how to do this. Oh, okay. Sorry, I just have to add. Yeah, I have to add my share screen to just show you something. Okay. Okay, great. So, okay, so when we're talking about sex trafficking, and I just wanted to show you this as an example, and I know that I have really highlighted this on my channel because it is so shocking what Scientology does. And I just wanted to show you a bit about this, and this very much relates to sex trafficking, and what that can be in Scientology.
They're going to just like nudge it along. I mean, you got the Office of Special Affairs, OSA. That's a huge part of the Sea Organization. That's a big, network of Sea Org members, and they're only there for the to silence people who want to speak out, speak the truth about Scientology, or cover for people who have done crimes. I mean, I've seen a lot of it because when I was the Treasury Secretary for the Flag Service Organization, I always had to make sure I kept money set aside for emergencies. What kind of emergencies? How about an adult doing something they weren't supposed to a child? And the way Scientology would handle that is to get usually both of them like quickly out of the state and not report it to the authorities. I mean, I could start naming names and things like that, and but I can tell you that's how it works. That's how it works in there. They get covered up. Scientology is not worried about the individual, whether they're a Scientologist or a SEAG member. They're only worried about their own reputation, their own money, and whatever it takes.
Okay, so yeah, they're only worried about their own reputation and their own money. So this is, and then relocate. This is exactly what we're talking about. And then relocating victims, perpetrators, or both in the effort to cover up the crime for this benefit to the organization. And I know you guys saw that it flashed on the screen, that he did spend a day speaking with the FBI about this, and I'm grateful that he did. I guess my frustration is like, and maybe that he had certain protections, but he's freely admitting that he engaged in this. Like, this is a crime.
Right.
This is criminal activity. And we really have not had the justice that we should have. Because, like, case in point, here's this guy on YouTube freely admitting, and for some reason, there's this blind spot of, or whatever arrangement he had with the FBI. I don't know. I can't speak to that. But it's a frustration that people were harmed, children were harmed, and they continue to be harmed. And where is the justice? Where is the justice for Scientology victims? It's incredibly frustrating.
And you would have think it warranted more than a day, but we can't go back and change what he did or what the FBI did. But that's frustrating.
That's very true. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, that is sex trafficking. So yeah, appreciate you guys listening to that. It's horrifying to me. It's absolutely horrifying, like just because of my own personal experiences, but this is an organization that is benefiting off the harms of children. It's so but I'm hopeful that there will be justice, and the focus really today around the world really is about harms to children. It has been
It
a
is.
huge shift. We've had in the last couple of decades many, many, many child survivors speaking out across many organizations, cults, religious organizations, etc., about the harms that they have experienced. And it really is, something that is, I feel like it's just beginning. It's in the beginnings of being addressed on a global scale. We've had royal commissions in New Zealand and also in Australia. And I think there's a lot more to come in addressing these really systemic issues. So, yeah. Okay, so back to this. So moving on from sex trafficking, we've got the topic of forced labor. So forced labor is sometimes also referred to as labor trafficking. It encompasses the range of activities involved when a person uses force, fraud, or coercion to exploit the labor or services of another person. But let's talk specifically about how that applies to children. So forced child labor, the term forced child labor describes forced labor schemes in which traffickers compel children to work. Traffickers often target children because they are more vulnerable. Although some children may legally engage in certain forms of work, forcing or coercing children to work remains illegal. Some indicators of forced labor of a child include situations in which the child appears to be in the custody of a non-family member, and the child's work financially benefits someone outside the child's family, or the denial of food, rest, or schooling to a child who is working. So that's really a summary of what child labor is. And I wanted to sort of focus on that because for the topic of this discussion, because we're going to look at that specific case of really that's what that case is about. It's forced labor of children. And these offenses do begin from, in terms of the charge offenses, are beginning from the year 2000 that are the subject of the complaint and the charging. Yeah.
And that second piece of it that they had talked about the minor's guardian, and that is being obsolete of the duty of care, and that is a specific crime. Just like child abuse, it is when you are the guardian of a minor and you do not provide the proper care. That's a federal crime.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely relevant to the Scientology experience of, being placed under people who were not your parents, for the benefit of the organization doing labor. And yeah, it's absolutely has gone on.
Mommers did have a question that she's asked twice, that if you join as an adult, should you be responsible for helping children escape? Two things. One, they don't feel that children are children, and so they don't have a responsibility of helping children escape because of the semantics. They don't have children.
So when you join as the adult, sorry, let me just pop this on because you're asking. So when you join as an adult, do you help all children to escape? When you're joining, you're participating in it. So how would you help? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you're part of the problem. Like, if you're an adult and you're joining that organization, you're participating in it. Do you help all children to escape? Well, no, you're participating in it. You're part of that organization. Should you? Yes, absolutely. How do you do that? That's more complex because you need to look at, where their caregivers are. And that's that type of work is for appropriate agencies to become involved and to advocate and prevent further abuses. And that's a whole, I guess you're talking about, that's a whole other kind of system that was probably not the subject of what we're talking about right now specifically. But yes, I hope that answered that. Was that a good answer? I don't know. Okay, so I'll jump in and share some comments. Okay, so Wise Mama, there were several of these guys and ladies that spent way more than a day with FBI, and nothing came of it. Very true. And I think there are specific reasonings for that. And yeah, I'm hoping that we're going to see. Well, I think we're going to see some more coming out with different people involved, and I think there's going to, these things do change hands, I guess, is what I want to say. Abuses of Scientology, yes, hard to listen to him. Yeah, I agree. It is very hard. It's hard because when you have experienced that level of abuse that was facilitated by the organization, and to see a person who participated and facilitated that abuse, it's horrifying. Yeah, and there's it's deeply disturbing, for sure. Okay. Oh, this is an interesting one too. Yeah, Evil Blue Eye, performative control, like for example, Christmas concerts. Yeah. So like in that coercion, I think, is that what you're saying? Like, I'm not sure. Maybe I'm missing something. Performative control. Yeah. Yes, I agree, Melanie. Yeah, that's exactly what Scientology does. Right. So yeah, if you're in Scientology, you don't see anything to save the children. And yeah, and you commented, Mona, as well. You said that they don't recognize children as children. Well, that's the Hubbard rhetoric. But, when a person's joining, they know children are children. That's just a basic knowledge, right? Do they go through a process where they are absorbing and accepting Hubbard's rhetoric and then becoming, like, through his words, degenerates themselves? Yeah, there's a process that takes place there, and I acknowledge that. But it doesn't exclude the knowledge that children are children. So whatever experiences you're going through to make yourself a criminal, that's on you. That's your defect. That's your issue. That's your shame, and that's where the blame is going to go. Yeah. Hi, Cherokee Joy. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate you. Oh, MD Media. Matt, good to see you. Thank you for joining in.
It's a good thing you guys can see my head nodding because I've had it on mute for a while. Sorry.
I wanted to add here, Wise Mama, this is great. So Xenu TV, which is Mark Bunker, he has such a great archive of videos. She's mentioned here 1982 Clearwater hearings, day 4, Tanya Burden testimony, child labor in Clearwater. I do encourage people to go to that channel and get more of that history of these hearings where people were speaking up, particularly in the Clearwater area. It's really important. And yeah, he just has a ton of great videos in there from a historical perspective. Okay, so
it's nice is that since then, the lay of the land and the thoughts of protecting children more is more of the nuance rather than the old way. So things have changed environmentally and globally.
Yeah,
the ideas
absolutely.
of protecting.
Absolutely, that's a good point, Mona. So Lapita, it's in the systems, culture, and policies and processes, probably making it challenging to report. Yeah, and that's a great point. So, and that is the point of the criminal, prosecuting on a criminal level or civilly, because that it is the systems, policies, and practices that enable and facilitate these abuses to continue to occur. And does it make it challenging within the organization, as someone participating in the organization, to report? Challenging, but so for and I'm going to make a distinction there, challenging for an adult or challenging for a child, challenging for both, but it's criminal for the adult not to report. It's criminal that a child is too scared to report, and that's part of the crime. So yeah, but and that's great, and thank you for adding that into the conversation. Appreciate it. Yes, evil blue eye. Yes, coercive control. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And as you're mentioning, like Scientology does that through various ways, through indoctrination, through these performative measures, these events, these this
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. It's a controlled environment. Yeah, absolutely, very true. Did you have anything to add, Mona, before we dive into these two
Let's dive
articles, I
into
guess,
them.
that cover this? Okay. And I just want to say again, I appreciate everyone for being here. I really do. And I know this is a tough topic. Um, yeah, so appreciate it. Okay,
I do
so,
want
yeah.
it is a tough topic, and it is something that's very deep, and it's very triggering, and sometimes chat, um, and just bouncing back and forth with chat goes by the wayside when we start thinking and processing. So please have grace for us, not catching all the chat all the time.
Yeah, we'll definitely we'll flick in and out, and I'll try to be mindful of that. Yeah, and look, maybe it's a good point to just add a few more people into the conversation here and just say welcome, thank you for joining us, Joe Bananas. Hey, all popping in before bed. We really appreciate you. Thank you so much, Rika. Thank you so much for joining us. It's so lovely to see you. And so add this question. So, Haggis Basher, would the Masterson case provide a precedent for hiding crimes in Scientology? Yes. Yeah. I mean, it would be monumental for the exposure. Now, would
Hmm.
it provide a precedent? Yes, because it's not happened before in regards to Scientology. Precedent in terms of law, no, because RICO has been applied to cases. Um, but would it? I mean, but would it be monumental for victims of Scientology and to have that applied? Because I don't think that's been applied to a Scientology case, to my knowledge.
Mm-mm.
So yeah, that would be huge. It would be huge if it
Well,
was successfully prosecuted. Yeah.
it was also brought up in the Baxter Paris case, and that went into arbitration, is trying to be
Yeah.
forced into arbitration. But Rico was brought up in that case also.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah. And I guess I'm saying, well, see, and the difference between the two is that this one is not going to be subjected to arbitration. That has already been argued in court successfully, and
Right?
it will not be applied. So this case now. The thing that it is waiting on is the Danny Masterson criminal appeal process to take place, which unfortunately is just dragging. And wow, can I just say to the Jane Does that are continuing to go through this, incredible strength, incredible. We appreciate them so much for this point, Haggis Basher, that what they are doing and what they have already achieved is significant, is monumental, has changed
It
everything,
is.
and has exposed the policies and practices of Scientology. It's incredible. And this case is incredibly important because it will take that even further. It focuses on the organization's participation and how they further harmed these victims. So it's incredibly important. Yes, so to not be stopped by this arbitration, whereas that other case, the Baxter case, is halted there. We also have the Valerie Haney case is also an incredibly important case as well. Also going through this arbitration, well, actively going through the arbitration, which is even more horrifying. So yeah, it's great, and we are going
Yeah.
to see this proceed. So yeah, absolutely. Okay. Molly Moon, thank you so much for commenting. Yeah, these live streams with both of you lovely ladies are so interesting and heartbreaking at the same time. Love to the Jane Does. Yes, absolutely. And I do feel that. Like, I feel that emotional sensitivity to, knowing what my own experiences are, but knowing also what experiences of others. And
Hmm.
it's the organization's involvement, whether you experience that harm as an adult or child, the organization participating, people around you participating in your harm and further harming you is an incredibly scary and horrifying experience to go through that continues to go on and on. until we're able to get some kind of reform. And reform is going to come out of these issues being made public and being successfully prosecuted as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you everyone for participating here. Really appreciate you. And we wanted to talk about the, so we're going to talk about the UNOI case, and this particularly focuses on the topic of forced labor, and particularly the forced labor of children. And the reason why this case is important to me to go into more detail, and I'm sure for you, Mona, as well, but you can speak to that, is it does touch on, go into more of the nuanced details of what this looks like, what kind of harms were the children exposed to through this system, and where the responsibility lies, and the types of harms, I think, is and how relevant that is to the Scientology experience as well. So if you want to comment on that, I'm just going to set up my share of the first article.
I think it'll be very self-evident as we go through it.
Beautiful. Okay, so this case is, so this press release here is from the Department of Justice, their Public Affairs Department, issuing this press release to say that 6 members of a former cult convicted of forced labor conspiracy charges in years-long scheme that included multiple minors. Now, we've got this article to cover, and then also another article. The other article is going to dive more into what are the sort of peripheral, like, involvement of the authorities in allowing this type of thing to continue in that area, or to occur in that area. And so this one's going to just detail the UNOI case. And another thing I wanted to mention of why this is really important too is that this is really recent. So the convictions were announced September 16th, 2024. And I believe it was like a year of investigation prior to that, which was done by the FBI. And there was a number of different departments that were involved, and this was state and federal involvement in this, and we'll go into that in more detail. But I guess so just to say that there was local involvement. Yeah, sorry, what was that?
I was going to say, in relative terms of length of process, this was a quick case. Yeah. This went really quick.
Really quick. Yeah. All right, so let's get into this. So, following a 26-day trial, a jury in Kansas convicted Kaba Majib, 50, Eunice Russell, 39, James Staten, 62, Randolph Rodney Hadley, 49, Daniel Aubrey Jenkins, 43, and Dana Peach, 60, of conspiracy to commit forced labor. The jury additionally convicted Kaba Majib of 5 counts of forced labor. 2 other co-defendants, Etinia Kinnard, 48, and Jacqueline Greenwell, 45, previously pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit forced labor. According to the evidence presented in court during the course of the trial, the defendants were all former high-ranking members of the United Nation of Islam, UNOI, or were wives of the UNOI founder, Royal Jenkins. The United Nation of Islam and these defendants held themselves out as a beacon of hope for the community, promising to educate and teach important life skills to members, particularly children, said Assistant Attorney General Kristen Clark of the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. Instead, the defendants betrayed this trust, exploiting young children in the organization by callously compelling their labor. So remember, that was the definition of child labor, forced child labor under the Human Trafficking Act, was essentially this. So for exploitation and compelling their labor. Prosecuting this case is a testament to the Justice Department's unwavering commitment to hold human traffickers accountable. The Justice Department will continue to vigorously investigate and prosecute parasitic criminals who target vulnerable victims to finance their lifestyles, seeing that that's how they're benefiting. The bravery shown by victims of the United Nation of Islam is inspiring because they spoke up about heinous atrocities committed against them as vulnerable children, said U.S. Attorney Kate E. Brubaker of the District of Kansas. In childhood, they suffered physical and emotional abuse, were denied a proper education, and were subjected to forced labor. As adults, these victims found the strength and courage to pursue justice and face their abusers. So it's really powerful. And it definitely speaks to my own experience in Scientology as well. Being denied a proper education, being subjected to forced labor, enduring physical and emotional abuse, and particularly the psychological abuse that I experienced, like looking back, was extensive and prolific. And I think that's what will become something that will become more understood, is the psychological abuse of children in Scientology.
Mm-hmm.
It is absolutely, it's invasive, it's prolific, it's unfettered, it's encouraged, it's facilitated. I think that sometimes that can be harder to see because compared to like physical abuse, that sort of thing. You know what I mean? But I think that the world will begin to understand more and more. And I know that all these never-ends joining in, I appreciate it so much because you have all seen it. You do see it. That's why you're here. That's why you're engaged. That's why, you're in this fight, because you know that it's important. And I think on a broader scale, it will become more known, like what this is, what is happening. I think there's a lot of work still to be done. Okay, so under the guise of false pretenses and coercion, these victims, some of whom were as young as 8 years old, endured inhumane and abhorrent conditions, said Special Agent in Charge Stephen Cyrus of the FBI Kansas City Field Office. Today's convictions should serve as a stark warning that forced labor will not be tolerated by the FBI. Okay, so and then we're just going to get into, some of the specifics of it. So,
before you get off from that, though, Mirriam, there was one thing from a 1984 claim that came out in a court document that I wanted to read. One of the court document reads from the judges, there were several things that they caught Scientology doing, and this is about Scientology and court documents. The third thing was the infliction of psychic harm, including the loss of moral judgment through brainwashing, accomplished by auditing and other practices and procedures. So they've already been caught in court.
And that was, but that was a state,
Yes, that was a state.
Which state?
That was California.
Wow. See, I didn't even know about that one. What's the, I want to look that up later. What's the name, or what's, It
is Church of Scientology. No, it is federal. It's Church of Scientology v. Commissioners. I'll send it to you.
Okay. So it's Scientology. Scientology is the Scientology civil suit against commissioners, is what you're saying.
Yep. I'll send it to you so that way you have it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mona. That's super interesting. Okay, so the evidence presented in court demonstrated that the defendants used a variety of coercive tactics to compel the victims' labor and services. In essence, the defendants effectively controlled the victims by manipulating the UNOI rules originally created by the founder. First, the defendants separated the minor victims from their parents and support network. UNOI enticed parents to send their children to Kansas by promising an education and development of life skills through work at UNOI-operated businesses. However, these promises were false. The minors did not receive an education from an accredited and licensed school, but instead worked excessive hours for UNOI's financial benefit. UNOI's unlicensed and unaccredited school or university was little more than a vehicle for extracting unpaid labor and publicly humiliating victims who violated one of UNOI's many rules. Second, the defendants controlled 1. What the victims viewed and read, 2. How the victims dressed, 3. How the victims addressed the defendants and others, 4. With whom the victims communicated, 5. Where the victims went, and 6. What the victims ate to ensure that the victims, particularly the females, maintained a certain weight. The defendants restricted and monitored the victims' communications with their families, members of the opposite sex, and others. The defendants required some victims to undergo colonics, which is a procedure designed to cleanse the colon by streaming gallons of water through a tube inserted into the victims' rectums. At the same time, the defendants rarely permitted victims to receive outside medical attention for illnesses or injuries. And we touched on this last time, where how you'd mentioned recent to that about the cleansing in Scientology, which is the purification rundown, and where you go and sit in the sauna. You're supposed to do it for 5 hours a day. You have to do it every day. And maybe it works up from, I think, 2 hours to 5 hours of sitting in the sauna. But you have to go in the sauna every single day. You have to take increasing amounts of niacin that continues to increase. And you cannot complete the program until you realize what's called like this end phenomena, which you don't know. It's a secret. And you have to figure it out, the right words that you're supposed to say. And then they say, oh yeah, okay, you're done. And then you go through an examination so that they make sure that you are... you have attained this level of cleansing, basically. There's a book that you read alongside it, which is called Clear Body, Clear Mind, and it's by Hubbard. And it's quite a hefty book, like for a kid to be reading. But yeah, many, many kids are going through this purification rundown still today. Yeah. And like how many toxins can a child have in them? Like, do you know what I mean?
Right.
It seems quite quite an extreme practice to put children through this. And this can go on for months as well. I did the Purif 2 times, and not as a child. It was actually as an adult. But when I was a kid, I definitely saw a lot of kids going through this process. And you know, and what was hitting me really hard was the knowledge of like we were never clean enough. You know what I mean? Like even
Right.
kids, like there was always going to be something wrong with us in Scientology. Was inescapable. And so yeah, this purification rundown is just another method of that. It happens to be more of a physical method. And it's extreme to do that to children, because children are not in a position where they can advocate for themselves. So how do they, you know what I mean? Like, how do they navigate that when you have adults saying, no, get in the sauna every day. You have to be in there every day.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean?
Locked in there. And I can't remember who it was that was talking about that some days. Oh, I do remember who it was. I won't say.
And let me say this, Mona, just to correct you, they're not locked in the sauna. They can leave this. They can take breaks, come in and out of the sauna. I just want to make sure I'm being accurate. And they can take breaks and come in and out of it, but they have to go in the sauna every single day. And I think it was I think the ruling is like ideally between 2 to 5 hours of sweating in the sauna every day for however long that went on for. Yeah.
Right. I'm just saying this one person's experience was they were locked in the sauna.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow.
And they
shit.
were held in there. Yes. And Amy had a question.
God.
Did you see children get sick from the Purif?
So, I wasn't there. Like, so where the Purif is a separate location, like where the sauna is and everything. So I wasn't like physically there, like watching kids go in and out of the sauna. My friends would say, "Oh, I'm going to go. I'm doing the Purif," and then they would have to go because they have to go every day, right? So I was
Okay.
aware of that experience. So when I did it, so I did it in early adulthood was the two times that I did it. I think the first time I was like 18, 19, around that age. And the second time was early 20s, early to mid 20s. And, and I did get sick. There was an occasion where I was literally laying on the bathroom floor because the coolness of the tiles was making me feel better. I was so sick. And they kept saying, "You have to go back in. You have to go back in the sauna." And I was like, "I don't think I can. Like, there's something wrong. Like, I'm dehydrated. Something's whatever it is." But I was very sick. And after a couple of days, it cleared up. And they were like, because the other saying, and this is part of it, is like, the way out is the way through. Okay. So that means that you continue to do the process and then you'll get out the other end. So it was like, get back in the sauna because the way out is the way through. Now, if you think about children being subjected to that, so this is the same process in the auditing, but also in the purification right now, all these practices, the way out is the way through. Even
Right.
that phrase in itself is not allowing for consent. It's denying consent. And so,
Right.
yeah. So, yeah, so that's part of it too. Yeah, and that's absolutely horrible that someone was locked in the sauna. I mean, yeah. Um, yeah, so the heat and the burning is from the niacin. Yeah, so that's what you would get this whole flush, this niacin flush. So you take the niacin and then you're supposed to do some running. Ideally for like 20 minutes of running, jogging, whatever, to get that all through your bloodstream. And it creates this niacin flush. And so when you're in, and that means like you're having like this hot, red, kind of rashy kind of experience, you go and sit in the sauna, and that's when you're supposed to be sweating out the toxins. Um, yeah, I agree. These are issues that need to be in court cases. Yes, thank you, Marie.
Agree.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Abuses of Scientology, so dangerous to be locked in the sauna. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and could cause death, could cause severe harm or death. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, and I don't want to get too far off, but the person that had told me the relayed the message was there was several children in the sauna that day, and it was a Thursday,
Mm.
and they needed to get their stats done, and so they locked them in there until they were done for the day.
Oh my gosh. So maybe their
Yeah,
statistic was like amount of hours in the sauna could have
yeah.
been. Oh my God, that is horrifying. Absolutely horrifying. Oh my gosh. Okay, I just want to say hi to Peter Anderson. Thank you for being here. And Powerlize to
We
Paralyze.
have a
Thank
running
you.
joke. Peter sits on the couch all the time. I put him on the couch for being a
Is that
bad
because he's
boy,
being
so he's
naughty? Yeah, he is a bit naughty. Okay. Well, you put me on the couch as well, and I don't think I was being that
no.
naughty. So, yeah. Thank you guys for being involved in this conversation. Yes, yes, this is really important to highlight. Okay, Amy M. The messages are don't listen to your body, ignore your needs. Absolutely dangerous. Yes. So the reason why this is so important. Thank you for putting that in there, Amy, because this is one of I believe that this is the most important thing to understand about what Scientology does to a person, whether that's an adult or child. But it is
Hmm.
way more dangerous when you're talking about children because it's their foundational development. And this message and this is repeated through the practices, through the training, and through these like abusive so-called counseling, which is also interrogations, and also through this messaging, the way out is the way through all these practices. It's ignore your body. Yep. Don't react and don't feel, because also certain emotions are not, and actually being emotional is not allowed. And certain emotions are specifically bad. So don't feel and don't react are the two messages that are continued to be perpetrated throughout the entirety of the Scientology experience. Well, when you hammer that into somebody repeatedly, you are creating a person that you can control. That is the outcome that is desired through Hubbard and his creation of these techniques. If you render somebody disconnected from their own body, that is a person that you can control. So what it does to children, and so if you can control a person and they are not in tune with how to feel or how to react, you can abuse them. You can subject them to prolific and unfettered abuse. And this is what happens to children in Scientology. Yes, mommers. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out. I'm sure it's so much worse for the children. I agree. And look, it's awful for adults. I absolutely want to acknowledge that. But children, their brains are developing. They cannot stand a chance. They cannot stand up to coercion. They don't understand what that is. They don't understand their rights. They cannot consent. They cannot agree to being abused. And so that's why I tend to focus on the children, also because that was my experience, predominantly in Scientology, was being born and raised in it. And throughout my childhood, it was the most severe of the abuse. So that's important. It's really important to highlight. Yeah. Niacin made me really dizzy too and nauseated from abuses of Scientology. Yeah. Abuses of Scientology. Yeah. Thank you for adding that. Yeah. And because it's ever increasing as well, because your tolerance is changing. So like now you're not producing the reactions. So the whole thing is about turning on a reaction and then running it out until the reaction is no longer there. So in order to do that, you have to increase the niacin, because you create a tolerance in your body. Now it has to be increased in order to create that reaction and that response that in your body. Like, it's very bizarre. And that's also, that same kind of structure is also the structure of what auditing is, really. It's like to create a response, and now we're going to run it and run it and run it until you're not having a response to it anymore. The same within the TRs, like the training routines, where there's like the bull baiting, sitting across from each other for hours at a time. It's the same thing. It's like create a reaction and then to run it and run it and run it until it stops. The way out is the way through. There is no like
flatten your emotions, flatten your reaction, right?
Flatten your reaction. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. To train you to not react. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I love this too. So, Oregon Valley girl, so excited about the future of the movement. Thanks for fighting for the ones who are marginalized, treated like shit, and passed over. We love you for it. Yeah, absolutely. And let me say this, the Neverons involved in this movement, and you can already see the effect of it, but they are what is going to change, and who are changing the movement by being involved in, like, absolutely, Mona, you're a really great example of that. We need your participation. We need you involved in these conversations so that we can learn as well as survivors. And, it is the thing that is going to make the changes, because first of all, there's so many more of you guys out there that are advocating and being active. And, I just want to say I appreciate it, because you're the future of this movement. You're how it's going to affect change. We need you. We need your strength.
It's a team effort. It's definitely just a team effort. That's for sure. Thank you for saying that. But it's a team effort.
Yeah. Okay. So, we'll continue on with this article. So, The defendants regularly punished the victims for violating the rules. The defendants withheld food, prohibited victims from speaking to others for over 2 weeks, locked them in a dark, frightening basement, imposed extra work, and beat them, sometimes in front of others, to create a climate of fear and intimidation. The defendants even held one victim upside down over train tracks because he would not admit to stealing food when he was hungry. Another victim drank water from a toilet because she was so thirsty after not being permitted to drink. And this reminded me as well. So when I was at the Blue Buildings, by this stage I was a teenager, and they would do what's called this, and there's a history of it. Like when I was a kid, there was an incident where at the ATA, people who are around the LA area will be familiar. There's that tarped off, like fenced thing across from like the main Blue Buildings. It's just like a kind of cement lot with like a little kind of single level building, cement in the front yard, cement in the backyard. That was where we were for years. And so what I'm talking about is this practice called throwing a person overboard. Throwing a person overboard was a tradition that Hubbard created, dating back to when it was on the Apollo, from those ship days, and it has been continued to be replicated in, like, where, for example, at the international base, they would throw somebody into the lake or whatever, or if there's a swimming pool, they would throw someone into a swimming pool. Well, there was an incident when I was a kid at the ATA in the backyard where there was a child. He was probably about, I want to say, maybe 6 years old, somewhere between 4 and 6 years old. I would say 6 maybe, and he was being held by like one child on each arm and leg, and kind of being swung back and forth like low to the cement ground. And the kids were running around kind of squealing, like all excited, and they were running back and forth into the bathroom to get cups of water, and then they were throwing the cups of water on the boy. Excuse me. I didn't know what was happening. I was like, I was probably, I don't know, I was a kid then. Maybe I was 8, I'm not sure. And I ran in to like stop what was happening. I was just like, oh, this has to stop. And I was really concerned. And I found out that as I walked into the bathroom, hold on, I got a cough. One second. Okay, so when I walk into the bathroom, I see that the adult is the one that's handing out the cups of water to, and so what she was doing was this practice of throwing a person overboard. Hang on one sec.
That's ludicrous that an adult would be doing that and promoting that to the other kids.
Yeah, so I was like, oh, because when I ran in, I was like, oh, I was like, okay, she can stop it, like stop this happening. And then she was like, no, she was the one that was doing it. It was like performing this practice of like throwing someone overboard as a punishment. And so then later on, I also this also occurred at the Blue Buildings when it was actually a boyfriend of mine at the time and his friends, a couple of his friends. And what they did was they took buckets of water. So they called him up in front of the muster, which is where all the group is like sort of standing all together, and called him out there, called them up to the front. And then they did this, performative thing. I think there's actually like a speech that you do, like, we commit your sins, da da da. And then they poured buckets of water over them. It was like to shame and humiliate them. Yeah. Wow. And these were teenagers in front of like a whole group of like varying ages, adults, teenagers, whatever. And so I don't know, that part just reminded me of that. But also when I was a teenager as well, and this now I'm going to be specific to, now it's after 2000 when this law applies. I was held in a basement and subjected to the punishments like that are very similar to this. And it was during a time that I was trying to leave the organization. I was wanting to leave. And so they were subjecting me to various things like forced labor and interrogations and thought reform, like reconditioning with the ethics conditions, and keeping me down in this basement with a group of other kids who were also wanting to leave. We were, all teenagers. And, not providing us access to education and all these various things that carried on. They just like kept us there and kept us there. And yeah, just so specifically to the time frame of the year 2000, these experiences are very similar to what I experienced in Scientology.
I see you, buddy. I see you. Always has to try and get into the picture.
Yeah. Okay, so the defendants instilled a fear of noncompliance and of leaving the UNOI by depriving victims of an education and development of life skills. The defendants also told victims they would burn in eternal hellfire if they left. Family members who remained at UNOI were required to shun as detractors any victim who left, and UNOI claimed credit for any negative consequence that occurred to members who left the organization. So this is also really, really important. And this absolutely has gone on, continues to go on. So when I was there, again, at the Blue Buildings, so we were told, okay, first of all, like, we weren't being provided an education. The kids weren't being provided an education, weren't being provided development of life skills. And we were told, like, if you leave, the worst things are going to happen to you. You are going to become a prostitute or homeless, or you're going to wind up dead. And if you leave. So it's incredibly scary, because if you don't have any means, you don't have the education or the skill set to navigate through life. You have a deficit. Like, when I was going through that, I was very aware that I had a deficit. And it was scary, and it did prevent me. Like, it would cause me to kind of, so at different times I would be like, they would be able to convince me to stay, right? And then I'd go, oh, okay, and and I would stay, and then I would work there a bit more, and then I would say, no, I want to leave, I definitely want to leave, da 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 da. And they would go through this whole process of trying to, like, through whether it's humiliation, whether it was through saying that the most horrible things are going to happen to you if you leave and you're not going to survive, and being told you're not going to survive, and also being in yourself, being so unsure about your own skills and ability and your own ability to survive. It was easy for them to apply those pressures and place you in these situations where you really did feel like scum, and that's part of this crime of keeping you in and continuing to violate you and continuing to profit off of the violations that they're doing.
It's true.
And they also had, so this part here about required to shun as detractors any victim who left. So as well, so you were considered what was called not being in good standing after you left the Sea Org, and so you were like deemed like a person that people didn't want to associate themselves with, and you had to get back in good standing. So you had to make amends, and there was a set process that you had to go through, and you had to ask for approval back into the group. So you are ostracized.
100%. And this is their shunning is your form of disconnection, right?
Yeah, there's disconnection, but this was something, there is also disconnection. So yes, that's a whole nother thing. But this was just purely for leaving, working for the organization. You were deemed as not in good standing. And that meant that, so this is just like ostracizing and like, oh, you can't sit with us. Like, you're tarnished. You need to make good on yourself, and you need to get back in good standing. It was the words. So the disconnection thing, yes, absolutely. But disconnection can apply to people not working for Scientology. They can just be, or have family members in Scientology.
Right.
Yeah. But this was specifically for those who left working for the organization.
Thank you for the distinction.
Yeah. So we did have the sentencing hearing, and I actually couldn't find an article on that, but that would have occurred February 18th, 2025. And so I don't know what the resulting sentencing was, but for example, Kaba Majib faces a maximum penalty of 20 years in prison, as well as mandatory restitution. So that's restitution to the victims. The rest of the defendants each face a maximum penalty of 5 years in prison. A federal district court judge will determine, what the sentencing is. And who was involved in this is the FBI Kansas City field office with the assistance of the Department of Labor and New York State Department of Labor were the ones who investigated the case. And the Assistant U.S. Attorney Ryan Hushka for the District of Kansas and trial attorneys Kate Alexander, Mirriam Zaratvitsky, and Francisco Zornoza of the Civil Rights Division's Human Trafficking Prosecution Unit they were the ones that were prosecuting the case. And just important to add that if you need any information about human trafficking, you want to report anything, report your own experience, report something that you've observed, then you can call 1-888-373-7888, which is the human trafficking hotline. And you can also click on this website here as well.
Or you can go to your local FBI office, wherever that happens to be, or civil rights office, and they'll take the claim there also. Yep.
Yes, perfect. So, the local FBI office, you can walk in if you want to go in person, you can do that. So there's various ways that you can report. This is the National Human Trafficking Hotline for the U.S., and so you can see the options here, phone call, and this is TTY. I don't know what the abbreviation stands for, but that's for hearing impaired.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, and then text, and then chat, online chat. Okay, and so if you or someone you know is a victim of human trafficking, we're here to provide the support you need. You can contact the hotline. You can even report a tip. So that's important to note as well. And how to stay safe and learn the statistics. And again here, so human trafficking occurs when a trafficker uses force, fraud, or coercion to control another person for the purpose of engaging in commercial sex acts or soliciting labor or services against his or her will. Force, fraud, or coercion need not be present if the individual engaging in commercial sex is under 18 years of age. So that is a really good website in regards to that topic. Okay, so the next one is this article, which is pretty lengthy, but maybe we'll just take a quick little break just to check in with everybody, see if anyone has any questions. Mona, did you have anything that you wanted to say about that particular article?
No, well, yes, I did call the Kansas City office to try and speak to the investigators there. Figured all they can do is say no, right? And I was resoundingly sent to the national office, the national hotline. So then I said, no, I don't want to do that. I called back a couple of days later and had a very helpful person walk me through the process, just what you were talking about, going either to the national office, online, or to your local offices. And that they continually say, and I've heard this from several places now in the last couple of months, is no victim, no crime. That if they're looking at crimes or a group committing criminal activity, they can't just go, oh, hey, unless it's children. They just can't go kick down a door somewhere, especially when they're adults. Yeah. You have to have people that are reporting the crimes. No victim, no crime.
Yeah, and reporting a tip is helpful because it creates the body of information that investigators might use. Now, to your point, that's a really good, important point, is like they can't act on that alone. They must have victims' reports, 100,000%. If this
Hmm.
is a good point, if there aren't any victims saying I was harmed and this is how I was harmed and this is how much I was harmed and this is when it happened and this is where it happened, we don't have the specifics of the case. We don't have the evidence that we need. So that's really important. I have reported to the human trafficking hotline. I've actually done that twice now. Originally was through a phone call. I really liked that process. It was easy. It was not obviously I had to talk about hard things, but the person was really empathetic and that was really good for that time. But I did not hear anything after that, and I more recently have followed up with an email. And who knows if I'll hear back. But all I can do is try,
Right.
and I think you also have to look at as well like quantity. So with the combination of people making those tips and the combination with some victim report in there, and that's why I'm talking about these things, because I do want to encourage people to report whether they've experienced it or whether they've seen it or if they know of something. Because this will create the body of evidence that is needed to compel an investigation, to compel this action. Um, and it took in this UNOI case, it took those kids growing up and then being brave enough to tell their stories. So it does take
Right.
time. And that's why it's important as well that we have this, to be able to look back as far as 2000, the year 2000, the last 25 years. In that time, these kids will have grown. We really need to encourage the reporting of victims. Yeah. Thank you, Mamas. No more kids in Scientology because kids can't consent. Absolutely. We'll
Absolutely.
highlight that every time. Absolutely. Um, yeah. Oh, cool. Okay, so YRB, I would suggest carrying in with you at the same time a copy of the documents you have just reviewed. Would you go back, Mona?
Would I go back to
Like to the FBI office and try
I
it?
I believe what YRB is talking about is if you were to
Oh,
go report that you could take a
okay.
copy of this article with you to show you or to show the FBI what you're
Yes.
talking about.
Yes, for sure. And in my emailed report, I did now have to look back because I've written so many reports, especially
Yeah.
recently. But I'm pretty sure yes, I did mention, I absolutely did. I did mention the UNOI and specifically pointed that out. Yes, absolutely,
Hmm.
because that's absolutely correct. Because it's so the conditions are so correlating, the offenses are so correlating that yeah, it is absolutely helpful to point that
Hmm.
out.
Hmm.
It's
And
like,
it shows a
you guys only
precedence
just
in the,
investigated this. Yeah, it's
yep,
to say, like, you guys only just investigated this. Okay, now can you investigate what happened
right.
to me and happened to others? So, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, now, Mona, this is a good question. I was meaning to come around to ask you this, but Peter Anderson, because he is a troublemaker. No, I'm just kidding. But question: any feedback on the Helping Survivors website from the last live with Miriam? Yeah, I
I
would.
have called and emailed and called and haven't heard a thing back. And I do
Mm,
think it is because I am not the victim. So they
oh,
don't
okay.
consider me a victim, even though I'm an advocate. They don't,
Right.
they won't respond to me. So no, I
So
have not heard anything.
oftentimes, right. So oftentimes these types of organizations have like a kind of a triage at the receipt point of inquiries and requests and stuff, and they will triage that, and they'll put it into categories of then and prioritize that. So yeah, I
Hmm.
can understand that. Um, I guess to say, if anyone's, I guess for me personally, like I'm pursuing some very specific things that I'm quite satisfied that I, have the advocacy that I need. Um, but yeah, I think, I don't know. if it's not vetted, so I guess we'll leave it at that. But I appreciate you for trying, Mona. And I guess anybody could, on their own volition, they could go and check that out too. Like there isn't
Sure,
anything to stop
sure.
them from doing that if that's what they wanted to do. Yeah, okay. So
Now, in
thank you
this
guys.
article, this brings it more into like Audit LA's realm.
Yes, very much, very much. Okay, and it's really about the we'll get into it, but it's really about the peripheral participation and facilitation. Now, for Scientology, I mean, this happens everywhere. This happens worldwide, and actually, their practice is to safe point the local officials. So that's a definite sort of repeated thing. But most particularly in Clearwater and in Los Angeles, we have hugely correlating circumstances here. So we'll get into this. So Kansas City, Kansas, officials helped a cult flourish despite warnings of child abuse. This is the Kansas Reflector by Grace Hills, published August 4th, 2024. So also very recent. United Nations of Islam ruled Quindaro Boulevard in Kansas City, Kansas for 2 decades. The group's leaders are about to go on trial. For nearly, so this was last year when they were about to start the trial, which resulted in the convictions. For nearly 2 decades, local government officials in Kansas City, Kansas, operating under the pretense of reviving a neighborhood. This is often what's perpetrated by Scientology. Oh, we're going to, have all these nice new buildings and like we're going to revive downtown Clearwater. We're going to revive this, revive Los Angeles. And actually, in partnership with the LAPD in Los Angeles specifically, they've been involved in these like Clean Up LA projects. This stuff has been going on for years. Yeah. When I was a kid, we would go
Specifically
around.
happened this week in Clearwater was the wanting to sell and vacate that road in the right of way, so that way they could put the road there and the green spaces and the beautiful park, make it a better place for
Yes.
everybody. It was a tactic they've been
Yeah.
using for 50 years.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. When I was a kid, they would have us do these. We would wear Way to Happiness shirts, and we would go around the neighborhood and we would do these cleanup projects, which was to like paint. They were called paint outs because that sounds really fun. Like we're gonna go and do a paint out, and it was like you would go in a group and you'd all be wearing the Way to Happiness shirts, and you would paint over graffiti. And again, it's like, ooh, Scientology, it's this messaging of like Scientology is cleaning up Los Angeles. Like, doesn't matter that it's kids doing it. Like, it just is that the benefit of the society and like, that's what's focused on is that, the revival of a neighborhood. Particularly in that environment where we were actually was, and I don't know if it still is, but it was heavily like gang environment too. So if you talk about a dangerous environment,
Right.
and we had like our own security force. So it was always like this like positioning of like Scientology security working alongside LAPD. You know what I mean? To like make the place safer and clamp down on crime and that kind of thing. Okay, so 8 people connected to an organization formerly known as the United Nation of Islam are set to go on trial August 5th in federal court on allegations the group forced children as young as 8 to work without pay. The indictment says the group, which a federal judge labeled a cult, so the federal judge labeled it a cult, that's good, also beat children, denied them health care, and forced them to eat strict diets. So you see this contrast of like, everyone is benefiting around them, but the children are being denied. The children are being beaten. It's at the children's expense. They are being exploited and they are being harmed for the benefit of those around them, including the city, like including members of the city and the city authorities. Okay, so you have to recognize this was an organization. This is a system, a business, right? A business has to actually engage with political members to do what they have to do. A woman who was trafficked by the group told Kansas Reflector. So if that's the case, how did they do this for years? Right? The unified government of Wyandotte County and Kansas City and a public school board ignored warning signs as they helped the United Nation of Islam flourish. In 1996, a group from UNOI led by the late Royal Jenkins, a leader who claimed to be Allah, told the city commission the group was moving to Kansas City to create its headquarters. Group leaders had decided to make Kansas City their heaven. Now, in Florida, in Clearwater, Florida, they call that Mecca. It's the Mecca of Scientology.
Right.
The UNOI ruled over Quindaro Boulevard area starting in 1997, running storefronts like Your Diner, Your Bakery, Your Gas Station, and others. A Kansas Reflector investigation uncovered details of the group's activities and local officials' support through federal and state court documents, city records, and interviews with the human trafficking survivor, a former city commissioner, a Department for Children and Family spokeswoman, and a human trafficking expert. Nathaniel Barnes, a city commissioner in 1996, said he raised an eyebrow when Jenkins claimed to be Allah, but Jenkins promised big ideas, like creating housing and storefronts. From 1998 to 2000, the unified government donated 5 buildings to UNOI, all on or near Quindaro Boulevard. Barnes said the government just needed to make sure the group was classified as a nonprofit, which it was, before donating the buildings. It's incredible. These buildings were used for labor trafficking of minors, sexual and physical abuse, fake schooling, and unregulated medical practice, according to prosecutors and survivors. Like, this is literally what happened. This is what happened. This is what is happening. And yeah, Scientology is an unregulated medical practice. Like, yeah. The woman who talked to Kansas Reflector about being trafficked by Jenkins as a child said she suffered severe panic attacks and depression after she escaped UNOI. She recalled a 3-month stay at a mental health hospital where she told her doctors of the physical, sexual, and psychological abuse she suffered and witnessed. She did not press abuse charges. Kansas Reflector doesn't identify survivors of domestic and sexual violence without their consent, and she asked that her name not be used. She said government officials enabled UNOI because it allowed them to take the burden off of running the Quindaro area, an area of low socioeconomic status and high crime rates. Defendants called the area the dangerous part of town, court documents show. So because it provides them with this relief, they're going to take their eye off of it. And this is absolutely, in my experience of growing up in Los Angeles, this is exactly what was happening between Scientology and the LAPD, and it continues to happen.
It's
absolutely
today. As of today, it's still 100%.
Absolutely.
And Clearwater.
Yep.
And they try to push it in Chicago, and I know they try it in Salt Lake City. So it's not unique to just those 2 cities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They do. Scientology does push that, like, this is how you'll benefit, you know, with those local authorities and law enforcement. And shout out to Audit LA because she continues to highlight that relationship between the city and Scientology, particularly in the Los Angeles area. And we also have a ton of protesters out there who are highlighting that relationship between LAPD and Scientology. So there's a lot that is being learnt and exposed about that relationship, and how and who benefits from that relationship too, and turning the blind eye and allowing certain things. But I love Audit LA because she is she asserts herself, and she's feisty. She's got this great personality. She's hilarious also. But she really gets the message of point, but she's serious, because she is like, she's studied what the what the allowances are, what you can and can't do, and she and she seriously pursues it, and she doesn't give up, and she keeps going back there, and it's like, yeah, it's incredible to see. We've never had that kind of force, I don't think, like that kind of, a person doing that.
She's
And
definitely been a force. Would somebody put audits from
yes,
maybe
please.
from one of my mods? Could you put audits link in there, please? I know somebody was just asking for it. Thank you so much. Yeah, she is incredible. She is a force to be reckoned with, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and so here is a map showing the location. So UNOI's government buildings donated by the unified government to UNOI. Okay.
Wasn't there one of those buildings was sold for $1 or something like that? I remember seeing that in
that's
the
crazy.
article. Yeah.
Yeah, so like I mean, this is a lot of buildings. Like, how can they just be given buildings and then no checks and balances? It's just crazy. One of Jenkins' daughters told the Pitch in 2003, so Royal Jenkins was the leader, that at least 5 members had called the state's child abuse hotline, including her, in 2003. Okay, so she told the Pitch in 2003 that at least 5 members had called the state's child abuse hotline, including her. That's incredible, because the state has the responsibility for the child welfare. 5 members had, including her, had called. Like, I just, yeah, that's, and they didn't step in. They didn't do anything about it. She died in 2008, and court documents show that Jenkins announced to members that he had his daughter killed. Oh my gosh. An employee at the Department for Children and Families, known at the time as Social and Rehabilitative Services, told the Pitch she had joined law enforcement to investigate. But the group's security guards blocked her from entering the property.
Blue building.
Wonder who else has security guards. Yeah. Yeah. Erin LaRow, spokeswoman. So even the Department for Children and Families, or known at the time as Social and Rehabilitative Services, and law enforcement, they couldn't go in. This is the situation that is continuing to happen. They couldn't go in. They couldn't enter that property to investigate. Because of the security guards. Okay. Erin LaRow, spokeswoman for DCF, said local law enforcement would have been aware of the allegations at the time. Despite the warning signs in March 2003, the unified government donated another building. Oh my God. About the United Nation of Islam. The United Nation of Islam. Like, just, and that's why I was like, turning a blind eye while children are being abused. And facilitating it by providing the facilities where it'll take place in.
It's because they're doing so much good in the community. They're revitalizing a neighborhood. They're making sure the stores are there. They're making sure economic feasibility is there. So let's not look at the children having drama and issues and abuse and coming out wrecked in their life. Let's not look at that, because everything up here looks just good.
Yeah.
Don't look behind the curtain.
Yeah. That's right. Yep, don't look behind the curtain. That is very true. Yeah. Okay, so about the United Nation of Islam. The United Nation of Islam, which rebranded as the Value Creators. Oh, okay. Value Creators. I mean, this sounds very Scientology to me as well. those kinds of words. And the Promise Keepers is a breakaway sect of the Nation of Islam. After Nation of Islam leader Elijah Muhammad's death in 1975, Jenkins said he was visited by angels or scientists who took him around the universe to show him how to rule Earth. He said those who chose to follow him would be protected when the final destruction came. I mean, this is kind of like relevant to a lot of organized belief systems, I guess. Jenkins told members to give up everything to UNOI, their money, their food stamps, deeds to their property, even their children. Yeah. That's definitely relevant. The survivor who was abused by the group said that when she was moved from her home state to Kansas City, she and other children, 7 to 12, were picked up in the middle of the night and transported by a charter bus purchased by UNOI. Neither the parents nor the children knew where they were going. A week after their arrival in Kansas City, the children were allowed minimal monitored contact with their parents, she said. Yeah. And I would definitely, absolutely, that correlates to the experience across in a number of ways. But what that particularly reminds me of is, being like shipped off to the ranch, these ranches. Is what it particularly reminds me of. But also, they were just moving children across these organizations, like just sending them over to Florida when their parents were in Los Angeles, for example. And then putting them to work. Yep. Children worked up to 16 hours per day in UNOI storefronts without pay. Court documents show that although members could be of any age, the defendants primarily used the labor of minors, the youngest 8 years old. In return, they would get meals, accommodation, and housing, according to court documents. Same. Yeah. Restricting meals was often used as a form of punishment. The meals they did receive were small and sparse, and Jenkins only allowed them to eat clean foods, which were bean soup, salad, and occasionally fruit. Former members told federal investigators. Court documents outline the colonics members were forced to get, which is a medical procedure designed to cleanse the colon by flushing water through it. It is considered unhealthy and dangerous by doctors. Documents also outline weekly weigh-ins and mandated weight for women and girls. Court documents show members were not allowed to consume media that was not approved by Jenkins, and were not allowed to wear clothes or use toiletries not made by UNOI. Members had to make requests for any outside item, and requests often were denied. The survivor who talked to Kansas Reflector said the children lived in houses with other families within UNOI. Court documents show that if children did not live with other families, they would live in UNOI-operated barracks in crowded conditions and be forced to follow a strict diet, while the defendants lived in spacious accommodations and ate as they wanted. Children were rarely allowed to live with their families. While under the group's control in her home state, the survivor lived with a woman who would threaten to harm her and watch her bathe. In Kansas City, she was expected to wake up at 5 a.m. to prepare 10 children for school and act as a servant for the adults, especially the men, she said. Men had multiple wives, and Jenkins married his stepdaughter and at least 12 other women, court documents show. Jenkins told women their duty was to serve black men, he said in his conferences. Jenkins told them this was their duty to Allah. He emphasized the eternal consequences of noncompliance, and if they attempted to leave, they would suffer physical and mental abuse, court documents show. He proclaimed this loudly, starting in basements before moving to an online platform, and eventually gained a following of a couple hundred people spanning multiple states, his daughter told The Pitch. Sharon Sullivan, a professor emeritus at Washburn University and a subject matter expert in human trafficking, said religion and a lack of transparency make this case despicable and classic. Religion and a lack of transparency make this case despicable and classic. It's a classic case.
Classic.
United Nation of Islam takes over. The UNOI presented itself as a church, and the group incorporated as a religious non-profit in Delaware, business records show. Court documents show UNOI operated at least 10 businesses around the United States. in their temple cities, including Wichita, entirely staffed by unpaid UNOI members. The documents also show UNOI would dispatch young members from Kansas City to work in new operations in other states, including Georgia, Maryland, New York, Ohio, North Carolina, and New Jersey, without alerting their parents. Yeah. The multi-jurisdictional factor of this operation posed significant challenges, the survivor said. The UNOI ran multiple operations in other states, frequently sending children across state lines. This all started before the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, which gave the U.S. government tools to have a comprehensive and coordinated campaign to eliminate modern forms of slavery, according to the Department of Justice website, which is what we covered earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's like same. Everything, it's so correlating. Like, there's multi-jurisdictions. Yes, that's a challenge. They had been doing this since forever, sending children across state lines, sending them here, there, wherever, to be used for labor. And then you have the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, which then changes things where now we can dive in deeper and actually investigate these things, what the U.S. government can. It would take nearly 2 more decades after the Trafficking Victims Protection Act for federal authorities to start investigating the UNOI. So this is only recent. According to an episode of A&E's Cults and Extreme Beliefs. Sharon Sullivan, a professor emeritus at Washburn University who is a subject matter expert in human trafficking, said this made the group's case despicable and classic. We're groomed to respect other religions, Sullivan said. She drew parallels between what happened with UNOI to the abuse within the Catholic Church, highlighting how such actions went unchecked for decades. She argued that the government sets the standard for community interactions with religious groups, and pointed out that the lack of transparency surrounding these organizations is a significant issue. This opacity, she said, contributed to UNOI's ability to take control of the Quindaro area, particularly as the group was perceived so positively. Barnes, the former city commissioner, said he never found a reason to be incredibly suspicious of the group. Because he wasn't looking. Right? Because he was benefiting. So, I can't see anything. This, according to the survivor, was not true. They were never supposed to be able to take over the whole city, she said. Through a lack of oversight and alleged conspiring, she believes, political people allowed this to occur.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's exactly Clearwater. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Government-aided corruption. In April 2000, city records show the KCK Public Schools Board transferred the former Roosevelt Elementary Schoolhouse to UNOI. Oh, this is what you mentioned. For a symbolic $1. UNOI repurposed the building into the University of Islam, where children received instruction from non-certified teachers and endured public humiliation, a survivor told A&E. The Pitch reported that the school board did not investigate UNOI's background or check if the teachers were board certified. The school's principal, who was one of Jenkins' wives and also his stepdaughter, only had a 6th grade education. Then school board president Gloria Willis told the Pitch she was not sure why this wasn't investigated. None of the 7 current school board members responded to requests to comment for the story. For A&E, one of the exploited children explained the mic during math class. Children who did anything deemed as wrong that day, like walking the wrong way down the street or saying hi, a word banned by Jenkins because he said it was connotated with hell. Oh my God, connotated with hell, would be brought in front of an auditorium of people and publicly humiliated. Their disciplinary action would be physical assault with members of the group punching the subject in the chest. Court documents show that sometimes physical punishments would leave members unconscious. Oh my God, it's horrifying.
Wow.
That is just beyond horrifying. Being punished for saying the word hi or walking the wrong way down the street. This is extreme abuse. Most children, like Kendra Ross, a woman who sued Jenkins for, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, I did glance over this article. I got I was like, okay, I understand the gist of, like this was back when you had originally sent it to me, Mona.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't read into some of the details of this, and it's shocking that, yeah, this level of abuse was allowed to happen to children. Yeah. Okay, most children, like Kendra Ross, a woman who sued Jenkins for human trafficking in 2018 and won nearly $8 million, were taken out of school around age 15 to work at UNOI storefronts. Court documents show parents from other states were encouraged to send their children to Kansas City for a fulsome education, not informing parents that their children would work extended hours in lieu of school or be sent to other UNOI businesses around the country. So, like in our case, like our parents knew we would be not educated and we would be subjected to labor.
Right.
Like they knew that. They knew the policies. They knew the Hubbard writings. Yeah. If members did not move their children to Kansas City for schooling, they were expected to work at UNOI storefronts as their, quote, education. The survivor who talked to Kansas Reflector said she was taught years below her grade level, and when she returned home, she had to do years of catching up. She spent time at Heaven's Inn No. 1, the house Jenkins and his family lived in that was notably more lavish than the others. She said she overheard a conversation between UNOI's lawyer and Jenkins regarding the transaction to purchase the schoolhouse for $1. She said they brokered an agreement with local officials to provide security for nearby low-income housing areas where no members resided in exchange for the schoolhouse. Yeah.
That was the dollar one that I remember.
Yeah.
Hmm.
The Pitch reported on a court case from July 2002 that involved members of the Fruit of Islam, the group's paramilitary. Oh, okay. Here we go. Paramilitary, consisting of teenage boys beating a non-member for walking his. Oh, wow. Okay. Okay, I'm going to read this again so I'm understanding it. The Pitch reported on a court case from July 2002 that involved members of the Fruit of Islam, the group's paramilitary, consisting of teenage boys, beating a non-member for walking his dog on school grounds. The unified government also donated a building at 1121 Quindaro Boulevard, which became your colonic center, where members were forced to get colonics by Dana Peach, a defendant in the upcoming August 5th trial, who was convicted. Jenkins taught members to stay away from medicine and healthcare. He believed sickness was brought on by personal will, and he ensured his members in immortality. Okay, so again, same. Jenkins died of COVID-19 complications. Oh, okay. There we go. There's the contrast there. Court documents show the defendants denied a child who will be a witness at the August trial his inhaler. Court documents also show that when members were allowed to seek medical care, which was rare, members were forced to see Peach, one of Jenkins' wives. Members were to call her Dr. Peach, despite her lack of certification. Instead of medicine, members were told to eat garlic. Yes, I can remember this as well. Yep, just take garlic. Even when there was a ringworm epidemic in the group, former members told the Pitch. According to the survivor who talked, Peach treated any kind of illness, but because they were low income, the city government just looked the other way, the former member said. Aren't you supposed to have some type of regulation in regards to that? In 2009, Shaquanta Williams, a 14-year-old who was trafficked by the group, died of cancer. Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
According to A&E, former members remember her begging to go to... Oh, God, this is so awful. I'm sorry, guys. This is really awful. Okay. Former members remember her begging to go to the hospital, but Jenkins refused. He said her illness was her will. The day before her death, after months of begging, she was taken to... Sorry, this is really horrifying.
Just skip it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me just finish reading that. Okay. The day before her death, after months of begging, she was taken to Children's Mercy Hospital where she died. What happens next? Okay. Is this a memorial for her here? Yes. Highland Park Cemetery. Okay. It's awful. Okay. What happens next? Although Jenkins died in 2021, 8 other leaders will be on trial. And those are the ones that we went through before with that conviction. And the court documents show that while Jenkins created the rules, the defendants enforced them. Court documents show the government plans to dispute the defendants' claim that they withdrew from the conspiracy, an argument that means they left the group. Okay, yeah, see, and these convictions, they are of the former leaders. So the defendants were claiming like, okay, well, we left the group and we don't do that anymore. We left. It's like, that's not good enough. And they were convicted for the actions that they did.
They were. The RICO part in this makes it to where their 501c3 status can be revoked. And I don't think they have adjudicated on the 501c3 status yet. I thought they had revoked it. I don't think that's come out in the IRS paperwork yet.
Okay, well, let's keep a lookout for that, because we would love to see that. And that should happen. Okay, and I realize I've been saying this last name probably incorrectly, because you probably say it Mahib, not Majib. I think I said it wrong. But Scott Toth, who represents Mahib, said he will argue the premise that UNOI facilitated human trafficking is categorically false. Other defendant attorneys declined to comment. Sullivan, the human trafficking expert, said prosecutors will have to prove fraud, coercion, and force in order to convict the UNOI leaders. But that's actually not true, because it was in relation to children. Interesting. But maybe because it's in relation to labor and not sex trafficking. So, yeah, right. Okay, so for labor, you would have to show that there's the coercion aspect of it. Okay, so UNOI lost its properties after failing to file, and regardless, they were obviously successful in proving that. UNOI lost its properties after failing to file paperwork on time, and the group is no longer operating under Value Creators, the Promise Keepers, or its original name. The survivor, the Kansas Reflector, interviewed, believes more people need to be prosecuted. Yes, absolutely. I'm never going to forget, the former member said, that a city allowed this to happen. Yep.
Yep. So this was a different take, again, that it just wasn't the perpetrators. It was the city that allowed it through looking the other way. And it's a lesson to be learned, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. That article really exposes, it speaks to that broader, that recognizing the broader responsibilities, involvements, and facilitation of these crimes. And it's shocking. And that there's no oversight, and there's no, that for so many years, there wasn't that investigation. There wasn't that looking in to protect the children. They were overlooked and they were harmed.
It's so hard because you normally don't, when you have mental, cognitive, and emotional abuses, you don't have bruises around the face and chest. You don't have broken arms. You do have that also in any society, but you don't have the physical appearances for the police to go crash down the door and go, oh, there's a bunch of abused children here, because they look normal.
Right. So, and in this UNOI case, they did have medical issues. Well, and there was physical abuse as well. But they had this internal, like, quote, doctor who wasn't even certified, and they were
Yeah.
only to go to this doctor. In Scientology, while there may be some access to, and it depends on the situation that you were or are in, you may have access to a doctor. However, that doctor is not going to report on any abuse, as they are, mandated to do. And the overriding sort of principle is to protect Scientology. And they also tend to lean towards these kind of like natural remedies. Okay, so like, and also let me give you an example too while I'm thinking of it, is we talked about the purification rundown, right? I know for in Australia, at least, like when I went to do the purification rundown, I was required, because there must be a law, there must be some requirement here, maybe it's in my state or in this country, I'm not sure, but I was required to first go to a doctor to get approved to do this program. And but they had a specific doctor that to refer me to. Oh, go to this doctor because he knows what this is. Like, don't go to your usual doctor. So see how there's like that way of like this channeling, and this continues to allow and facilitate this abuse, even through in this case they didn't have a certified doctor, but like even when there are, it's, you know what I mean, it's like channeled in a certain way, and it's this person who is the one who's going to facilitate that kind of thing. And then prominently in the Lisa McPherson case, what was the name of that doctor? I can't even think his name off the top of my head. Who
Minkoff?
actually has a Minkoff, and he currently has a wrongful death suit against him for the Whitney Mills case,
Right.
and rightfully so. There's so many of these cases that were just, that we haven't heard about. There's actually a document in, this is a topic for another time, but there's a document in Mike Rinder's OSA files that is actually another case of where in Clearwater, someone experiencing severe mental distress is sent to she's a this is another one of those Scientology, like, oh, we only go to this person, and I'll have to do a whole review of it, but she is a chiropractor and naturopath, and that's who he was sent to. And she told him, oh, you need to dial down the amount of B vitamins you're taking. You're having a B vitamin reaction. Like, no, this guy was experiencing delusion.
Right.
And he was experiencing severe mental distress. And then they were discussing about, this is a whole document that's in these files. They were discussing about relocating him, and that there were people, they wanted to get him away from the Clearwater area.
I think I did I can't remember his name, but I did a story on Scientology crimes for him. I remember doing it. As I said, I can't remember his name. I can look it up. But yeah, that's crazy. That's just...
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I don't think this one is well known about, because he's actually linked to a celebrity, a prominent Scientology celebrity as well.
Oh.
I'm going to tell you about this one maybe after.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So again, so just coming back to like this way of, okay, so like what you were saying, where they don't, no one can see these harms, and the people that they are going to that should see physical harms, sorry, you were talking about, it's more like focusing more on like the psychological harms where you can't like see it in like physically and that sort of thing. But even where there was physical, there's obviously things put in place that prevents that reporting and that advocacy and the protection of the child. So, yeah. Okay. So I think we covered the items that we wanted to cover. And we can go back to the chat for a bit. Thanks guys for hanging out with us. This is quite a topic. It's a very important one. Um, yeah. Okay, yeah, Lupita. They wear a mask of goodness, but behind the scenes, horrific abuses are being perpetrated. Yeah, absolutely. Yep, it's true. Um, yeah. Um,
The main lesson learned is report, report, report. Even if you think you're not being
yeah.
heard, the right ears and the right eyes will see it at some point. If you don't have a voice, you're being silenced. And that's just another form of abuse.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Um, there's so many comments in here. I'm just choosing, trying to find ones
That's
that are
okay.
like topical to. Okay. But yes, here. So abuses of Scientology. Totally agree, Mona. DSHS is way behind in recognizing emotional abuse. Yeah, on that topic that you were just talking about, and protecting kids from it. Yes, and I would say, I mean, I can't speak to the agencies or the systems, but I would say in terms of like psychology as a whole, what we understand and how people may present due to traumas. I feel like the general public awareness is raised. Would you say so?
I
Which
definitely
means,
it
yeah.
it is, and it's getting better. I know part of what we went into the OIG meetings with was to talk with them about um, training their officers, training their um, they have a unit that specifically goes for when children leave or when they try and escape things, mental health
Mm,
units, trying to help those mental health units. I'm trying to remember what specifically LAPD calls it, um,
mm,
but just trying to help some more training, some more specific cult behavior training,
yeah, absolutely.
indoctrination, recognition.
Which is really needed, and needed also in the context of that human trafficking as well, because there are the laws are in place, and like what you're speaking to is really the training and the understanding and the recognizing of seeing where this is and what it is and how that's presenting. And, an example that I've talked about before, which was after the Human Trafficking Trafficking of Victims Protection Act came into effect in 2000. It was actually in 2001 where, specifically you're talking about the LAPD, where I had escaped, and LAPD detained me and took me into their custody. And then
Right.
Scientology had filed a missing persons report in order to find me. They were able to locate me through that system, and they were able to just pluck me and take me out, like, and take me back. But there were so many clear warning signs. Like, I didn't have any parents in the area. I didn't have any family in the
Right.
area of Los Angeles. And I was living and working in these buildings. Like, it didn't make sense that, you know, nothing more was done to intervene or to have a conversation with somebody who is able to handle something in a delicate way, in a way that is based around the best interests of the child and their needs, and to
Or just
have that
even
gentle conversation.
exactly, or even having them have them being law enforcement or the authorities have the recognition that children growing up, especially in cult in high control groups, have short stories. They have a fear of the authorities. They have a fear of reporting. So they're not going to report. You're going to go to them and say, hey, are you escaping something? Nope. Nope. Going to shut up. Not going to, and they're not going to tell. So just having that recognition would help.
Yeah, absolutely. And just echoing what you said, report, report, report. Thank you, Amanda. Yes.
Hmm.
Um, it's what's needed. It's what it absolutely needs to happen. Yeah. Haggis Basher, it is no wonder they convinced their members the outside world and medical care is bad, could not get away with this so easily. Right, that's the other thing is, keeping that insular. So even the victims in there are scared to go to those advocates. We're told that psychology is evil, like psychologists and psychiatrists are evil. So you wouldn't, if you were suffering with psychological issues, you don't have anyone to go to, you know?
Right.
Yeah, LAPD, just send the abused kids back. Yeah, it's very true. Yes, okay. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Marie. We can't turn back time, but can do something now, Miriam. The world is watching. Yeah. And the
They
world
are.
is paying attention to abuse of children in institutions. Like this is a global thing, and this is examining different types of institutions. That includes religious institutions. So, yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Abuses of Scientology. Funny enough, I learned not all psychologists were bad when I was in CCHR.
Well, that's the first
Huh,
time I've
be
heard that
interesting. Yeah, that's the
perception.
first time I've heard that.
Yeah.
Because definitely the policies, it's like the eradication of all the entire mental health sector is like the
Right.
Hubbard's words on it. So I'm interested.
That's their
Okay,
battle
so
plan and their
maybe,
mission. Yeah.
well, I wonder if they had particular psychologists safe pointed, right, to give
There you
testimony,
go.
right?
Yeah, that makes sense that there was a certain few that were okay, so that way they
Right.
were safe pointed and they gave a different viewpoint. Yeah.
Yeah. And that they could use, because a lot of times, well, they've produced a lot of material for CCHR for like kind of like public awareness campaigns and stuff like that. And they have used, when they can find somebody who they can use in that profession. Yeah, I'm sure they would say like, oh, well, that person's fine. You know what I mean?
Right.
Oh, wow. Abuses of Scientology. I was the head of CCHR Switzerland. I did not know that. Huh. Wow. Would love to hear about that. Wow, very interesting. I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing that. Um, so yeah. Well, anything else that you wanted to add, Mona? We're about the 2 hour mark. We might wrap it up.
And really nothing more than what we've already talked about. Report, report, report. And no
Yeah.
victim, no crime. I know victim's a dirty word, but that's what the authorities use. You have to have somebody that was victimized by the crime and they have to report. So I know that seems like a broken record, but it's the truth.
Yeah. And I want to say this as well is that if there is anybody out there listening, yes, Michael, I can't see Mona's chat. Oh, but Mona, yeah, you can't bring up your chat either on here.
I can't, but it's been linked and I've
Thanks
seen,
for pointing that out, Michael. Yep.
yeah, I see both on the chats. Thank you, Abuses of Scientology. I shall.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to say if there is anyone out there that has experienced human trafficking in Scientology, forced labor, or sex trafficking, and understand that sex trafficking extends to when you experienced sexual abuse, sexual assault, and the organization participated in causing further harm and protecting the perpetrator for their own benefit, then yeah. So what I want to say is that I understand that sometimes it can look, the history of this movement, which I mean, it's amazing to see how far it's changed in recent time. But the history of this movement is that there has been this kind of like core, kind of central, like anti-Scientology kind of group, and there was like a hierarchy, and there was politics and etc. And there was people who, you know, had their own asses to cover. You know what I mean? And so that's very complex and messy, and we're moving away from that. And I know that things are still very complex and messy, and I think that's just human involvement. But what I want to say and what I'm getting at is that when if you are wanting to report something, understand that's your right, and also
Right.
you have your own protections in that, but also you can and should do that entirely on your own. This is not meant to be of like we thing. This is my message is this is an individual thing. Yes, it affects, you know, there are greater effects to it, but this is an individual right and an individual pursuit of justice if you want to take that up. And it doesn't require, you don't even have to tell anybody. You don't have to tell us. You don't have to tell, you know,
No.
you can choose who you want to tell or who you don't want to tell. You don't have to come on YouTube and announce anything. If you don't, you know, you don't have to come on YouTube and tell your story. You don't have to tell your story to anybody, unless you wanted to, you know, that's what we're encouraging is that report. I guess what I'm saying is it's moving away from this kind of like, very kind of collaborative process where there are dangers in that, and to move to like individual survivor empowerment of like, this is what the law provides for you, and it's there if you want to take it up, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
And may I come, Mommers? I got the message. Thank you very much. You do have a voice. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, so and look, let me say this. Okay, well, I'm gonna pull up Mama's comment here. Mona, not everyone who has been in Scientology is who they seem. People are not who they seem. Yeah, I think that could largely apply to anywhere and everywhere. I think that that's part of, you know, there's a lot of work that we as individuals have to do to protect ourselves and to learn and understand ourselves and our environment. And I'm going to relate that to Scientology for a second to say that when you're being taught to not be in tune with how you feel and being taught not to react, you can be subjected to abuses just purely through when you're not don't have that system in place. Like there is a protective safety system in place for that to be developed. And what I want to say is that's also a universal thing. In any case where a person doesn't have this strong safety system, and anyways, there are perpetrators that want to harm people. But yeah, so I'm speaking on this and I'm bringing it up to say it's not Scientology, this Scientology, that, in terms of, you know, people. There are people who harm people out there in the general world, specifically. And yeah, and so, but specifically the focus is here is like what we can address in terms of law in regards to Scientology, and yeah, in particular in regards to children experiences. Yes, thank you, Marie. Yes, safety first. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah. Okay, well, I think that is all that I wanted to, I guess, cover.
Thank you for bringing this up again for this important topic. I see the correlation and the parallel between UNOI and the Church of Scientology, and it definitely in some respects, I kept thinking, oh, well, it's on steroids of what the UNOI claim is, but they have their own respects and their own aspects that it's like, it's just as bad. It's gross. So,
Mm.
yeah, but the parallel is definitely there, and we need to keep the information. I mean, this is a current case. This isn't something that happened back in the 80s. This is October. This was right before Christmas. This was after Christmas that the convictions happened. So this is fresh.
Is
Then we
super
need to stay
fresh
it.
and sentenced just February this year. Investigated, like you mentioned earlier, the investigation took place very quickly. Like, and that's what we need. We just need that one thing to tick over to compel that investigation. Once that investigation is started, I mean, we already know that there is so much, there's so much to that. But it only takes a handful of survivors to report, but it does take, for anyone who is listening to this, like, to ask themselves if that is something that they want to do. Like, do they want to pursue their right to report? And yeah, and I've made my report, and I'm encouraging other people to do that. And I have reached out to people that I know, and I've sent them links and where they can go to report. Whether they take that up or not, that's for them to consider what
Right.
they want to do. But the but the law provides for that protection, and we were denied that protection, and we're highlighting the involvement of the authorities and people who are in place, positions that are in place to protect children that have failed them. The thing is about this as well is, like, what will come from this, if this is a case that is then pursued, is then you do have outcomes, and potentially you can have reforms. And it's also, it informs the public of that this is what has taken place.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep. And you just need to continue to shine the light where everything's trying to be hidden.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you everyone for participating here and on Mona's channels.
Thank you,
Um,
guys.
yeah, really appreciate it. It's been a big topic, and thank you so
We will
much.
hopefully in another 2 weeks. We've been doing this every couple of weeks, so let's do this again, Sam.
Yeah. All right. See you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, sorry.
That's okay. Are we
Okay,
off?
now I'll do it. No, not yet. Bye. Yeah.